What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm C.
I'm P.
And today we're back with Jordan Peterson. You know we love him around here. A little Jordan Peterson. Gonna, share some things about the effects of Tinder in the course of sex. I feel like he have conversations that people don't usually have, and he explains it in a way that people don't usually do.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
that's why we
enjoy
like
it.
him. You guys know this. As always, let us know what you think about this video in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ring that bell so you can get notified for our upcoming videos.
And tell us what you think in the comment section about the
Jordan?
topic. I feel like the cost of sex. People don't usually, it's something you really would think about. You know what I mean?
And all that, but you really want to get back to your smartphone? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, well, it happens all the time.
It happens to me.
Yeah,
She'll never
Christina,
admit it.
No,
Yeah.
it happens during our podcast. To tell you to put your phone down.
I know. I'm researching
Well, they're
things
very-
for
they're
the
very
purpose of the
addictive.
podcast.
They're very addictive.
Yeah,
Well,
they're
let's-
very addictive.
let me-
And I read the other day that the
They're
preferred,
very alluring.
they
We're
are.
kind of going together.
The preferred method of interpersonal communication between young people now is texting rather than face-to-face
Right.
communication.
Right, and the swiping that apes don't
Well,
swipe.
that's a very interesting topic too. Like the Tinder phenomenon. That's
Right.
because that's also a major technological revolution, because what it's done, I would say, for the first time, is reduce the cost of rejection to males to zero, because it hides it. The only people you ever hear from are people who haven't rejected you.
Although they, true, but
Look at pause it right there. I think part of growing up as a man is to understand that rejection is a part of life. And I think a big part of that is being rejected from women, because we know that women are more likely to reject guys than the other way around. So when you're growing up as a young adult, a lot of guys are afraid of rejection, so they don't ask a girl out. And you have to grow out of that and learn from that, and go out and you go out of that childhood mindset. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think the point I make is like, with Tinder, if you all do swipe, it's like you erase that, that rejection part. So you never learn to not be afraid of rejection, because it's so like far away from you. It's too
Or to
far
have
away
confidence
take
in
a left.
yourself. Because
Exactly.
being rejected, being turned down, not just in relationships, but like with jobs and stuff like that, it gives you more confidence to want to do better and be better. And okay, maybe the words I used wasn't right. Let me try this instead. Or maybe I'm not being romantic enough. Maybe I'm just thinking with my dick. Let me do this instead. It pushes you to think more outside the box.
Yeah, I feel like with Tinder you don't really learn what you can do right or wrong. Like you can like swipe right on Tinder on the phone, but then when you get to actually talking to the women, like you're awkward because you don't have enough experience talking to them. I feel like that's a part of growing up. Like Tinder is good and bad. I'm not saying Tinder is bad, because a good thing about Tinder is that it connects us. It gives us more of a, I guess, option. But also options can be good or bad. So it's complicated. I'm not saying Tinder is good or bad, but it has effects, negative and positive effects that we gotta talk about.
But there was one man who had to make 300, he actually tallied it.
Yeah.
He had to make 300 requests of swiping right or whatever
To
for one
yield
reply.
one.
So
Right,
I think he
right.
had the sense of rejection.
Sure, but it's massively attenuated.
Yeah.
And it's
because-
not observed.
Yeah, you're not being humiliated.
Not at
Right,
all.
right.
Not at all. It's
Right.
really at arm's length, and you can
Right.
swipe very, very rapidly, and so you can get all that rejection over with in a very short period of
Right,
time.
it's like losing a video game or something. You go on to the
or
next-
less, because
Worse. Not nearly as bad.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know what, and I mean Tinder also reduces one of the other things that you want to think about with regards to sex, and I think this is probably particularly true for women, is that to what degree is it in women's interests to allow the cost of sex to fall to zero? Because with pornography certainly does that, and it just seems to me that that's not a very good long-term strategy for relationships between men and women, because whatever sex is worth, the cost of zero is the wrong price. And so
good way to
that's,
put it.
Well,
I've
you can
heard
go to the
from,
bunny ranch and pay quite a bit for it.
well, true, but that's true, but you don't have to. And
No.
I've heard from a number of women read blog reports on their frustration with their attempts to be relatively sexually selective. Like, let's say they decide that they're not going to sleep with their new partner on the first date. You know, they're frustrated by the fact that to the degree that they're being cautious in their sexual behavior, which I think is actually an admirable idea, that they're instantly outcompeted, especially if their partners are somewhat impulsive, by women who will say yes at the drop of a hat. And so, well, again, I don't think, you know, it depends on what the goal is. That's the thing, is that there's short-term sexual gratification, but the literature indicates that married couples, for example, or couples in a permanent long-term monogamous relationship are more sexually satisfied than single people. And maybe the single people have to be parsed out into those who are sexually successful and those who aren't. But I suspect that wouldn't make that much difference. But whatever. There's the utility of relatively immediate sexual gratification, for whatever that's worth, and the adventurousness that goes along with that, let's say, the hunt and the excitement of having a new partner and all of that. And maybe even the danger that's associated with that, because people like to have a little bit of danger in their life. But what's the goal? It's like, what do people want? And I mean, there's a great...
Before you continue, do you think that the fact that some girls make it so easy for men to get sex, it forces other girls to make it easier? Because like he says, they're being outdone by women that will have sex with them guys on the first date. And then guys start to expect that. The first date, we have sex. And when the guys don't get that, they're like, oh shit, I don't want to, I'm just go to a girl that actually will give it to me on the first date.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like we want to think about that, how it's forcing other girls that don't want to do that to have to actually do it because they are being, they're not going to be taken seriously by guys that don't do it, you know what I mean? Go ahead.
Yeah, so like when that happens to the girls that are getting pushed aside because of the fact that some women grow up, like me for example, I grew up and I didn't want to be like most of the girls I went to high school with. I didn't want to give it up just because everybody else was giving it up. I wanted to be special. I wanted to be with somebody I cared about and cared about me. But when guys are getting it so easily and frequently, and like you said on the first date, they're not going to look towards girls like me that are trying to build a relationship or build something, because in their mind, I'm getting all of this. What do you have to offer that I'm not getting from 20 different women?
Especially in high school. So in high school, guys, all they care about is
getting
sex.
it, exactly.
So if you...
And because of that, it brings women like me to a depression state, because sex is also important. It's a reliever of stress. It's important to have that in your relationship. So because first of all, you're not relieving any of that stress or pressure that you have. You're still aversion to all of those hormones are all bottling up and going crazy inside of you because you're not giving any release. Second, you're getting rejected over and over again because there's other people out there that are giving it up like this and that and this. So it forces you to give it up even though you really don't want to, because of the fact that you feel like if you don't, no guy's ever going to be with you. You're going to be single for the rest of your life. You're going to be,
So you think it creates self-esteem issues with those women? That like since they get rejected,
self-esteem,
so much,
depression.
But they don't realize that it's not because of them. It's because of something else that you're not even thinking about.
Society,
you know what I mean?
pretty
Exactly.
much.
So I feel like that's why he says the cost of sex shouldn't be zero. That's what he says. And there's a lot of consequences to that, because a lot of girls wanna wait or not do it in a certain amount of time, but then they kind of have to, because they know that if they don't, the guy's gonna leave and go with another girl who who will do that. So I think people don't think about those effects on culture that sex have. They say, oh, people should just be free to do whatever they want. And yeah, that's true, right? Yeah. But also there's also cause and effect to everything that we do, and we're not thinking about the effects as much as we should, like John Peterson is.
That's why I agreed with what Ben Shapiro said in the last video about how we as a society pushed away love and marriage and pretty much tossed it aside and made sex so
Cheap.
easy and cheap to get.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we shouldn't have done that.
Continue.
A book called A Billion Wicked Thoughts. But what do people want? And I mean, there's a great book called A Billion Wicked Thoughts. It was written by Google engineers, and so it contains great psychology because Google engineers don't care about political correctness, and they just write down what they find, and they don't even notice that it's politically incorrect. Hence James Damore, for example. And what they found was that women use pornography just as much as men, but the pornography that women use is verbal. It's not imagistic. And that the pornographic novels, essentially, follow the same extraordinarily standard plot line to the degree that publishing houses like Harlequin, which
I was going to say it's the bodice rippers, the
that's right.
romance novels.
Yeah, right. So in the Harlequin series, you have the ones that were published like in the 1970s that are they're tame. There's a small bit of,
They're pretty hot, actually.
well, there's a variety. They range
I
from
haven't read them.
completely tame to essentially to hardcore pornography. But the plots are quite similar, and the plot is, young, relatively innocent woman finds powerful, interesting, dangerous male, tames him, and then they live happily ever
Everlasting
after.
love.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And it's the Beauty and the Beast plot, which
Yes.
is a fundamental.
Wasn't
Which is
the
a
biggest search for women on Pornhub we discovered, we did an episode on porn, was for women it was rape? Wasn't that like the
No, lesbianism. Or at least that was your porn. Yeah, that was your
That's
search.
not me.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I
You know
didn't
what my porn is? Going to the Williams-Sonoma store.
I know. It is. It is female porn.
All those pots.
Oh, the pots and pans.
No,
but
but
Bill
seriously-
Maher,
Calm
the
down.
philosopher Bill Maher, once said that men and women should never tell one another their fantasies because women are outraged by what we say and we're totally bored by what they say. And I thought, like, women have kind of these scenarios and, I don't know, unicorns. I don't know what they're doing. Storylines. And men it's just
Storylines.
like, I don't want to say this to you, but it is a lot of just close-ups of female body parts.
Yeah, well, men are much more visually oriented
I know.
and sexually. And
But now they're being shamed. I mean, now it's called the male gaze. And so there's all of this like, oh my God, the Sports Illustrated is exploiting the female figure. I think, yeah, I mean, men like it. And I'm worried that now, sort of the way in the past sexual gays were shamed, we're now reversing it and shaming like heterosexual.
Yes, that's definitely happening.
Remember we had the young woman who complained about being whistled at, and I said, don't worry, it stops.
Yeah.
Do we have a little...
Before you go continue, I want to click on the point thing. Like, I think one reason that women like love lesbian porn is because it's more how do I say this? It's more like storyline based. I think women love, I guess the womanizing of things like pedals and talking and all that stuff, but men go straight to the to the hardcore stuff. Yeah.
Erotica is novels, but it's pornography novels, like 50 Shades of Grey.
Because women is more like is more aroused by in the mind.
Because it's not just the sex acts that is arousing the women. It's everything leading up to the sex act.
More than the men.
More than the men. The men, it's the sex act and the in your face what they're looking at, like the boobs, the ass,
it's more visual for men.
the things jiggling, like they like to see that visual effect. For women, we could close our eyes and just get wet with our eyes closed.
Is there anticipation? I would say. So women get aroused more from anticipation, then men get aroused more from the visual stimulus of it.
Anticipation and a lot of foreplay. Like if before we had let's say we're gonna have sex tonight. Before we had sex, you took me out to dinner. You bought me flowers. Now we had a romantic setting, and then you brought me back home and you were kissing me a lot and speaking sweet nothings in my ear.
Exactly.
All of that turns women on more so than you pulling your pants
It's-
down and me staring at your junk.
It's funny because for the men it's the exact opposite.
Opposite.
All that dinner and flashlight, guys were like, okay, I have to do this because it gets her happy, but I wish just put her clothes down and I'm ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, it's like the opposite. Let's continue.
A little bit of time for a couple more topics with you, because one of the things that is coming out of this younger generation, and you have a chapter of it in your book, which I don't...
Sorry, I wanted to finish what the line that we were pursuing.
Oh,
I
sorry,
should do that.
sorry.
Well, with sexual behavior, the question is, what's the end game? And this is what people have to ask themselves. Is like, one of the corollaries to the female pornographic romance is actually the establishment of a long-term relationship. And the question is, you know, it's so funny because I got pilloried in the New York Times for talking about enforced monogamy. It's quite interesting, eh? Because I talked to
that gets brought up like in every
it's
snarky
so
interview.
ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. I talked to that woman for two days.
I know, and it's just like a little side comment, and then that became like the
Can you
center,
just
the
explain,
showcase.
like enforced monogamy? You mean forced marriage, or?
No, I mean that it was an anthropological term which she knew perfectly well because she's a very smart person. And all it means is that there's a pronounced proclivity in human societies around the world to enforce monogamous relationships at multiple levels of the sociological hierarchy. You do it culturally, you do it in expectation, you do it legally. You know, and enforced monogamy, so my son was just married, and if he came to me next year and he said, you know, hey Dad, guess what? I've managed to have 4 affairs in the last year with hot women and my wife hasn't found out about any of them. I'm not going to pat him on the back and say, good job,
son.
You know, I'm going to say, what the hell's up with you? You know, you violated the vow that you took. You're putting your whole future at risk. You're betraying yourself and your wife. And well, that's enforced monogamy. You know, the idea is that the social norm is the establishment of a long-term monogamous relationship and that there are strictures put in place to support that, but also to punish deviation from it. And you say, well, you know, maybe not so much on the punishment end, but it depends. It's like, what do you want? What is it that you want? You want a long-term stable relationship or not? And if that's the goal, then your behavior should be devoted to whatever it is that facilitates that goal. And I certainly don't see that casual and impulsive sex fits that bill, not in the least. And all of the evidence with regards to living together shows that that's actually detrimental to the establishment of a long-term relationship. So, first of all, common law marriage, people who are in common law marriage are much more likely to be divorced. That's the first thing. The second thing is, people who live together before they get married are much more likely to be divorced after they get married. So the idea that, well, you can try something.
I wonder why that is. Like, if you live together before marriage, you might like to get divorced when you actually get married. Huh.
One on for size and see how it works, and then you're going to see if you're compatible. It's like, that's one story. Another story is, well, how about you and I live together for a little while, and you know, if you're not so bad, but maybe I can find someone better, and if I do, you know, in the next year and a half or so, because we're not hooked together in any formal way, I can just trade you in. It's okay, you can do the same to me. But I don't really see that as the sort of complementary mutual interaction that leads to the formulation of long-term trust. And I think it's a better story for interpreting what constitutes living together than, well, you know, we're going to try each other out because that's what mature people would do.
That's a lease or a rental.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Never wash the rental cars or anything.
Yeah, well, that's it. But most importantly, the data indicate that it doesn't work. Is that you're more likely to get divorced, not less likely. Because maybe the right attitude is, well, you're probably about as flawed as me, and you know, we're lucky that we found each other, and so let's see if we can make a commitment because we're engaging in something that's very risky, you know, an intimate relationship, and we're going to commit to each other and see if we can build something of value across time. And there's a definite risk in that, but there's a compliment to your partner. It's like, well, I think you're worth making a sacrifice for. And what's the sacrifice? Well, it's everyone else. It's a big sacrifice. And if you don't see that as a compliment, then I don't think you're thinking, because not only is it a compliment, it's sort of like the ultimate compliment. And maybe you don't get to have a marriage that works without that compliment. Maybe it's so difficult to establish a long-term relationship that's functional that you have to make a walloping sacrifice very early on in the relationship in order for that to even be a possibility. And, you know, maybe not, because what the hell do we know about what binds people together? But it's not that easy to stay with someone for a long period of time. You know, it's a real commitment. It takes a tremendous amount of effort.
something he really says that very interesting is about sacrifice. How I know that anything good you come in life, you know that happens to you in life requires sacrifice. I've never thought about relationships like that. Like the sacrifice is everyone else. You know what I mean? Like even though I have the option of being with so many other people that I'm sacrificing them for you. I never thought about it like that. That's interesting. How it's a sacrificing everyone else to pick just one person.
And I think a lot of people forget that it's a lot of work. Like, because they think, oh, we're in a relationship, it's a lot of work just being in a relationship, just living together, because there's a lot of compromise, there's a lot of fighting, getting to know each other, and realizing each other's flaws, and learning to accept them, and trying to establish a household with household rules that we both agree to. That's a lot of work in general. And then you think, oh, I'm going to get married, and I could just chill, and everything will be fine. Once they get married, they realize that the work only gets harder. It doesn't get easier. And then they just end up divorcing because they can't take it. They thought once they got married, it would be easier than when they were living together and they were dealing with those compromising situations. No, it just gets more compromising because as you grow in life, you change as a person. As I'm changing, you're changing. The place that we're living is changing. We may go from apartment to condo to a house. We may have 3 to 5 kids. Like, there's so many different.
And also, when you get married, things get more one, as I would say. Because when you just living together, you guys can have separate bank accounts. You're not entitled to things. So it's like whatever. So from the state point of view, you treat it as two different individuals. But once you actually sign those papers, bank accounts become one. The state starts treating you guys like like you're a pair. So I feel like that also adds to it. How if you're not married, even if you live together, you have more freedom living together, being unmarried, than getting married and living together. And your freedom actually gets more restrictive.
And that's what I'm saying. Like even having those freedoms, it's still a lot of work just being in a relationship in general. And then when you get married, those freedoms disappear, and it's even more work.
Exactly.
So it's like a lot of people. That's why I get confused when a lot of people say that they thought it was going to be less work, or they thought that it was going to be easier. Like, no.
It's harder. Speak to any old, married couple who's been doing it for 20, 30 years.
My best friend's parents, they've been married for almost 50 years, maybe over.
That's an accomplishment.
That's it's huge. And as they say, there's times they hate each other, but they will always love each other. That's just how it is. There's, especially when you're building a life together and you're building a home and then you start raising kids.
Yeah, it gets more complicated. Right, guys. All I gotta say. Anything else you gotta say?
No, that was it. That was good. Jordan Peterson is awesome.
Yeah, tell us what you think in the comments. Like always.
Yeah.
Like,
Comment.
subscribe.
Bye. Bye.